Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. We are coming to the end of The Prophet by Kahlil Gibran. Then a priestess said, "Speak to us of prayer." And he answered, saying, "You pray in your distress and in your need. Would that you might pray also in the fullness of your joy and in your days of abundance. For what is prayer but the expansion of yourself into the living ether? And if it is for your comfort to pour your darkness into space, it is also for your delight to pour forth the dawning of your heart. And if you cannot but weep when your soul summons you to prayer, she should spur you again and yet again, though weeping, until you shall come laughing. When you pray, you rise to meet in the air those who are praying at that very hour, and whom, save in prayer, you may never meet. Therefore, let your visit to that temple invisible be for nothing at all but ecstasy and sweet communion. For if you should enter the temple for no other purpose than asking, you shall not receive. And if you should enter into it to humble yourself, you shall not be lifted. Or even if you should enter into it to beg for the good of others, you shall not be heard. It is enough that you enter the temple invisible. I cannot teach you how to pray in words. God listens not to your words, save when He Himself utters them through your lips. And I cannot teach you the prayer of the seas and the forests and the mountains. But you who are born of the mountains and the forest and the seas can find their prayer in your heart. And if you but listen in the stillness of the night, you shall hear them saying in silence, "Our God, who art our winged self, it is thy will in us that wills. It is thy desire in us that desires. It is thy urge in us that would turn our nights, which are thine, into days, which are thine also. We cannot ask thee for nothing at all, for thou knowest our needs before they are born in us. We cannot ask thee for anything at all, for thou knowest our needs before they are born in us. Thou art our need, and in giving us more of thyself, thou give us all." Right? Would love to hear what you think of this. go ahead and type an exclamation mark. Okay, if you'd like, go ahead.
Did someone type in the chat? I'm sorry, I couldn't find my typing thing.
Go ahead, Mark.
Okay. This is a very fascinating chapter because it seems like he has a very unique take on prayer, in the sense that he seems to be thinking of prayer as maybe as a form without a content, almost. The pure form is we enter into this ether, but we're not really asking for anything, and we're not requesting anything. In that sense, it overturns the idea, the biblical idea of ask and you shall receive, although I'm not sure where that occurs, but I think it does. So in a sense, he's emptying prayer of content. Don't ask for help for your friends. Don't ask to be humbled. Don't ask to receive something. But simply by entering into this common space, which he calls a private temple. What was the word he used? Invisible temple. And we seek some sort of experience, which he labels as ecstasy or sweet communion. So a subjective experience which is shared by other subjects, and therefore becomes a kind of universally shared experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The word prayer is very interesting. You know, I was talking to a friend of mine who is very much into linguistic, and we're talking about the word prayer as it occurs in the Bible. So there is prayer in English, there is prayer in Hebrew, and there is prayer in Greek. They all actually mean quite different. Prayer, if you look at the roots of prayer in English, they're all about asking. There are multiple words for prayer in Hebrew, which mean quite different things. And all of that complexity is lost when you narrow it down to asking. But the most interesting of all, the New Testament, which is in Greek. The Greek word, which is translated as prayer, actually the meaning of it is closer to contemplation. It is all about concentrating your attention fully on something which you regard to be of highest value. And that being the primary thing. So that is the foundation for what he's talking about. His concept of prayer that is talked about here is the Greek concept of prayer, which is there in the New Testament. It is not about asking. It is first about saying, you know, this is the most important thing, and I will focus on that. It is your commitment to focusing on what you think is the greatest thing. And everything else begins from that. That's the beginning of it. So, that's what I wanted to say in response to Mark. Mark, go ahead.
Thank you, Shrikant, for bringing in that linguistic perspective. and is the Greek word from the Christian Bible you're discussing pros euchomai?
I will have to check. I was trying
Yeah,
to check it in the
I think it is.
Bible.
I think it is. And
Okay.
pros euchomai
Mhm,
is a compound word that
mhm,
has a preposition pros
mhm,
for it. And euchomai, EU is like goodness,
mhm,
good.
mhm,
And homai is like having it. Pros is moving towards something.
mhm.
So you might think of this as trying to move towards inhabiting the good. And that is much more similar, I think, to what he is talking about.
Mark, let me go ahead and do so. Pros, you, so that's good. And what was the last one?
Komai with a chi, like a big X,
Mhm,
that would be like
mhm.
CHOMAI. So it's a verb that is like trying to go towards and embrace what is good.
Very, very good. Thank you. So I want to say a couple of things. I'm going to pick up this first, and then I will. That's beautiful. Thank you. Next up is Maritza. Maritza, go ahead.
Oh, I'm fascinated by the linguistic aspect. It makes, I will say, I'm so grateful for those definitions because it makes this whole little poems make more sense to me. I was looking at it. I was thinking that he was advocating for more of a meditation as we think of it, as opposed to prayer in this modern American society in which I find myself. Um, I was thinking it sounded more like meditation than prayer that he was advocating. But now, with your definitions, it gives more of a fullness to what he may have been thinking. And I love that it seems he's saying, if you're looking for prayer to provide you with answers and you know you're already lost, right? He says, I cannot teach you the prayer of the seas and the forests and the mountains, but you who are born of the mountains and the forests and the seas can find their prayer in your heart. That line to me is just so beautiful. We say this same thing, Shrikant. We just maybe not this pretty, but we're saying this when we get together and we discuss Louis Sullivan. When we say turn to nature, look for designs to your systems in nature, we're saying the same thing. Look from within to shape that which is without. And that's what I'm hearing him here. And I just think it's just magically beautiful. That's my absolute favorite line. You who are born of the mountains and the forests and the seas can find inside you. I really, really like it. And then, he's speaking of, he even goes so far as to say, if you listen in the stillness, and I like that because it's also the thing of we allow so much noise of today's modern society to get in the way of our communing with ourselves, that we we may lose sight of things that is within us. And we have, oh, I'm not remembering the name right now, but we did a meeting on a systems thinker who told us that every answer and every solution already lied within us. What is the name of it? I don't remember right now. But this is kind of similar to what he's saying here that it's what we need, it's just a matter of communing with oneself to find whatever it is we're seeking. We already have that. And this is not said, but to me, to my thinking, what is implied here is that, so he's saying, if every answer already exists within us, like, the prayers, right? The flip side of that is that if you seem to be seeking a thing for which no peace can be found, and no answer, maybe the trick here is to sit and rethink whether or not that's truly the question being sought. And I feel like that's what he's kind of gently molding us towards considering, in some of the way in which he keeps saying, we cannot ask thee for aught, for thou knowest our needs before they are born in us. And if one is, believes in a higher spiritual power, I think it makes sense that this spiritual power would actually not be someone just like giving out, here's an answer for you, here's an answer for you. More like somebody helping to shape you, and maybe someone to bounce things off. And in time, you will see that, again, the answer was within you. And if you don't see that, there some type of a little bit of a shift needs to happen. So I just thought it was lovely. Thank you.
That's great. So I'm not a Greek scholar, but I've looked at kind of individual words. I mean, one of my favorite words in Greek is pros. Pros is translated as with. Okay, so you're simply saying, like, when it says in the beginning was the word and the word was with God, that is, with is pros. So pros actually means with, not just kind of sitting side by side, but it is face to face. It is interacting. There is this thing flowing between you and what you are with, what your pros. It is that consciousness of each other. It is the love of each other. All of that is packed into that word pros. So all it is saying here is that, prayer is simply being with God or with nature. Okay. So, like, for example, the one that you read, I cannot teach you the prayer of the seas and the forests and the mountains. Okay. The seas, the forests, and the mountains are what they are. They just are. Okay. Another person cannot teach, okay, this is how you pray to it. No. He's saying, but you who are born of the mountains and the forests and the seas. Okay. Now, this is another very deep principle here. You're saying you're born of God. You're born of nature. Nature is not something which is alien to you, that you're trying to somehow, deal with something which is not yours. You are actually of it. And therefore, so that's why it says, but you who are born of mountains and the forest and the seas can find their prayer in your heart. So it is in you. The nature is in you. And all it is saying is that just open yourself to nature and be with nature. And this is also you. So this is the goodness of nature, saying this is what good is. Good is something that you want, that you are going to be with, and that your fervent wish to be with that is what is being talked about when he's using the word prayer or contemplation. So it is in some ways profoundly simple. it's not a big thing. It is simply being with nature, with reality. It's simply saying yes to reality as a starting point. Thank you, Maritza. Next up is Mark. Mark, go ahead.
Thanks, everybody. Fascinating. You know, I had one thought I would share briefly about the very end of it, where he basically reiterates that we can't ask for anything, and then thou art our need. It reminded me of this story from the Brahmanas, I believe, from India, of the young boy Dhruva. And Dhruva was one of the sons of a king. I think it was Dhammapada, who might have been the son of Manu. But he was not going to inherit the kingdom. And as a young boy, he saw his half-brother sitting on the king's lap. The half-brother was intended to eventually take over the throne. And Dhruva said, I want to sit on the king's lap as well. And the mother of the other half-brother said, Dhruva, you will never sit in the king's lap. You will never inherit the kingdom. So Dhruva ended up running away, basically, and going to become a forest dweller, living with the yogis in nature, we could say. And the yogis said, Dhruva, you're too young to be here. You're not at the right stage of life to enter the yogic lifestyle. Go home and come back when you've raised a family. And he said, he was not deterred. And he said, no, I want you to teach me the ways of meditation. So eventually, because he was undeterred, they taught him how to meditate. And then Dhruva eventually got into a meditative state from which they could not distract him. It was a deeper state of meditation than they had ever witnessed before. And eventually, he has a vision of Krishna. And perhaps you may know this story already, so I apologize. He has a vision of God, and God says, Dhruva, your devotion and meditation are unparalleled, and I will grant you any wish. And what people often think is that, oh, he wished that he could go and sit on the king's lap and maybe inherit the kingdom. But no, he said, my only wish is to remain in this state of mind, contemplating you, the God. So he realized at that moment that it was the God that was his need, more than anything that he might have thought of asking for before that. And then eventually he was made into the most immovable point in the universe, which was the star Polaris, the North Star, because of his unmoving devotion to God.
Wow. Mark, thank you so much for it, because that's actually the best example in the Indian corpus for it. And that is Dhruva means concentration. He personifies concentration. And this concentration is not on anything. It is concentration on the most important thing. It is the concentration. So for example, you read the last ones. We cannot ask you for anything at all, for you know our needs before they are born in us. You are our need. So it's like saying God is all that. God basically encompasses everything. So it's like everything. It's like nature. You can call it nature. You can see the root principle of nature. And thou art our need, and in giving us more of yourself, you give us all. So it's the same principle of it's the principle of concentration. It's like it is saying, I mean, this is nothing but this is like the Western version of the Indian idea of dhyan or concentration, which is the goal of the Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. The entire Dhyana Yoga is focused on, or Raja Yoga is focused on that. That is the goal. And then when you're focused on that, it's not as if you're focused on one thing. You're actually focused on everything. So you're focused on one thing and you're focused on everything, because it's like the root of everything. You're saying, I'm just reality, just truth. It's like, I just want to focus on truth. That's it. And this point is also very big, that in giving us more of yourself, you give us all. So this is the same point of Solomon asking for wisdom. Okay, wisdom is, and God says to him, because you asked for wisdom, you will also have wealth and everything else, because everything else comes from it. So that's also the principle. So and the Dhruva is a great example. So thank you, Mark. Great observation. All right, let's go to the next section. Marissa, could you go ahead and share? And it's going to be Connie. And then anybody else wants to read, go ahead and type an exclamation mark. Type
This
one.
it's a hard shift, Shrikant. We're going to pleasure.
Yes.
Then a hermit who visited the city once a year came forth and said, "Speak to us of pleasure." And he answered, saying, "Pleasure is a freedom song, but it is not freedom. It is the blossoming of your desires, but it is not their fruit. It is a depth calling unto a height, but it is not the deep nor the high. It is the cage taking wing, but it is not space encompassed. I, in very truth, pleasure is a freedom song, and I fain would have you sing it with fullness of heart, yet I would not have you lose your hearts in the singing. Some of your youth seek pleasure as if it were all, and they judged and rebuked. I would not judge nor rebuke them. I would have them seek, for they shall find pleasure, but not her alone. 7 are her sisters, and the least of them is more beautiful than pleasure. Have you not heard of the man who was digging in the earth for roots and found a treasure? And some of your elders remember pleasures with regret, like wrongs committed in drunkenness. But regret is the beclouding of the mind and not the chastisement. They should remember their pleasures with gratitude as they would the harvest of a summer. Yet, if it comforts them to regret, let them be comforted. And there are among you those who are neither young to seek nor old to remember. And in their fear of seeking and remembering, they shun all pleasures, lest they neglect the spirit or offend against it. But even in their foregoing is their pleasure, and thus they too find a treasure, though they dig for roots with quivering hands. But tell me, who is he that can offend the spirit? Shall the nightingale offend the stillness of the night, or the firefly the stars? And shall your flame or your smoke burden the wind? Think you the spirit is a still pool which you can trouble with the staff? Oftentimes, in denying yourself pleasure, you do not store the desire in the recesses of your being. Who knows but that which seems omitted today waits for tomorrow? Even your body knows its heritage and its rightful need and will not be deceived. And your body is the harp of your soul, and it is yours to bring forth sweet music from, in, or confused from it, or confused sounds. And now you ask in your heart, how shall we distinguish that which is good in pleasure from that which is not good? Go to your fields and your gardens, and you shall learn that it is the pleasure of the bee to gather honey of the flower, but it is also the pleasure of the flower to yield its honey to the bee. For to the bee, a flower is a fountain of life, and to the flower, a bee is a messenger of love. And to both, bee and flower, the giving and the receiving of pleasure is a need and an ecstasy. People of Orphalese, be in your pleasures like the flowers and the bees.
Thank you. Thank you, Connie. If anybody else wants to read, go ahead and type R in the chat. Tanya, go ahead.
Then a hermit who visited the city once a year came forth and said, "Speak to us of pleasure." And he answered, saying, "Pleasure is a freedom song, but is not freedom. It is the blossoming of your desires, but is not their fruit. It is depth calling unto a height, but it is not the deep nor the high. It is a caged taking wing, but it is not space encompassed. In very truth, pleasure is a freedom song. And I fain would have you sing it with fullness of your heart. Yet I would not have you lose your hearts in the singing. Some of your youth seek pleasure as if it were all, and they are judged and rebuked. I would not judge nor rebuke them. I would have them seek, for they shall find pleasure, but not her alone. 7 are her sisters, and the least of them is more beautiful than pleasure. Have you not heard of the man who was digging in the earth for roots and found a treasure? And some of your elders remember pleasures with great like wrongs committed in drunkenness. But regret is the beclouding of the mind and not its chastisement. They should remember their pleasures with gratitude, as they would the harvest of a summer. Yet, if it comforts them to regret, let them be comforted. And there are among you those who are neither young to seek nor old to remember, and in their fear of seeking and remembering, they shun all pleasures, lest they neglect the spirit or offend against it. But even in their foregoing in their pleasure, and thus they too find a treasure, though they dig for roots with quivering hands. But tell me, who is he that can offend the spirit? Shall the nightingale offend the stillness of the night, or the firefly the stars? And shall your flame or your smoke burden the wind? Think you the spirit is a still pull which you can trouble with a staff? Oftentimes, in denying yourself pleasure, you do not but store the desire in the recesses of your being. Who knows but that which seems omitted today waits for tomorrow? Even your body knows its heritage and its rightful need and will not be deceived. And your body is the harp of your soul, and it is yours to bring forth. Sweet music from it or confused sounds. And now you ask in your heart, how shall we distinguish that which is good and pleasure from that which is not good? Go to the fields in your gardens, and you shall learn that it is the pleasure of the bee to gather honey of the flower, but it is also the pleasure of the flower to yield its honey to the bee. For the bee, a flower, is a fountain of life. and to the flower, a bee is a messenger of love. And to both bee and flower, the giving and the receiving of pleasure is a need and an ecstasy. People of Orphalis, be in your pleasures like the flowers and the bees.
Thank you. Thank you, Tanya. Maritza, can you moderate for a few minutes? Thank you.
All right, folks, let's discuss this section on pleasure. Please type an exclamation mark or raise your hand if you'd like to chat about your thoughts on this section, this poem. Anya, please go ahead.
So it's a very interesting chapter or section. It does seem like he understands the cycle, the never-ending cycle of how by giving pleasure, you receive, by receiving, you give pleasure. It's this cycle that given the circumstance, it is partly only natural to have those temptations. So it's very interesting, and I love the whole book. Aside from that, the whole book is just incredible. And the illustrations, of course, you would think it's like some sort of pornographic, but it's not. It is very beautiful. I actually love it. So very, very natural, very nature, beautiful, depicting just life. It's great.
Thank you, Tanya. I tend to agree. My favorite here is naturally, the analogy that he gets to at the end there. I love the idea of the flowers and the bee, it's the idea of this give and take. So the message I'm hearing here that the natural state of pleasure is to flow in two directions. And I think that is just a lovely thought. I'm really fascinated by where he cautions us against regretting past pleasures. I really, he talks about how elder folks are, they remember pleasures with regret, like if there were wrongs committed in drunkenness. And I'm fascinated by what he says after, because he says, but regret is the beclouding of the mind and not its chastisement. And I really like that, because it is a reminder to us that, there should be, again, there's this concept of you would not be who you are today without your lived experiences. And the pleasures in your life are yet another lived experience. So I really like that he's pointing out here to us, he says, they should remember their pleasures with gratitude as they would the harvest of a summer. But he doesn't actually stick to that, because again, I think what he's trying to point out is the ebb and flow, the bidirectionality, as it were, of this concept of pleasure. Because he also says, if it comforts them to regret, let them be comforted. And in so doing, he's reminding us that comfort is yet another aspect of pleasure. So in turn, what he's ultimately saying is that they're choosing, or they're remembering their pleasures with regret is a form of a pleasure they are participating in today's reality. It's kind of a fascinating thought. It's also a reminder to us not to judge. My pleasure is not going to look like your pleasure. And who am I to judge what yours looks like? And I think that's just off. There's such beauty in that very gentle admonishment / reminder.
Thank you. Thank you, Maritza. So I just wanted to point out one thing, which I think is one of the most amazing things about Gibran, is that he will take two things which are very different from each other, which on the surface are very different from each other, and you will see echoes of the same pattern run through them. So we talked about prayer and we talked about pleasure. And look at how each of them ends. And they're actually analogous to it. So let's look at this one, that you read out. And now you ask in your heart, how shall we distinguish that which is good in pleasure from that which is not good? Okay, so you can replace the pleasure by prayer, okay, for a moment, and you can see the same pattern occurring.
Or evils,
What's that?
also for evil.
Yes. So it says, go to your fields and to your gardens. So again, this is about go to the mountains. And he's saying, don't like talk about mountains, go to the mountains, okay, and the sea. And you shall learn that it is pleasure of the bee to gather honey of the flower, but it is also the pleasure of the flower to yield its honey to the bee. For so the flower and the bee are with each other. Is the same idea of prose. It is a reciprocal relationship. It is both being conscious of one another and needing one another. There is a love between them. There is a reciprocal face-to-face value exchange that is going on. So similarly, when we're talking about nature and you, nature is speaking to you. God is speaking to you, and you are listening to it, and you're speaking back. So there is this back and forth dialogue that is going on. For the bee, a flower is a fountain of life. And to the flower, a bee is the messenger of love. And to both, bee and the flower, the giving and receiving of pleasure is a need and ecstasy. So this is the same idea as with of what is going on between this. It's the same idea of being focused on the other in this way. This is like the I-thou relationship that Martin Buber talks about. And he's bringing that in both the context of prayer and pleasure. It always focuses on nature and saying, just look at nature and learn from it, and find it in your heart and act from it. Next up is going to be Mark.
Thank you for so beautifully describing, both of you, the mutual relationships and an awareness of that. And this line about how shall we distinguish that which is good in pleasure from that which is not good, I think we should be reminded that that which is not good is not necessarily evil in his schema, in his way of looking at the world. And I thought it was really interesting how he brought in the 7 sisters, because in some ways it's kind of like an astronomical reference to the constellation, but with pleasure it would be 8 if it had 7 sisters. And I wonder, I mean, if other people have a different understanding of this. I was thinking that the 7 sisters, all of which are better in some way, more valuable, more beautiful than pleasure, are the things that you could find while you are looking for pleasures. You might find beauty, you might find goodness, you might find prayer, you might find love or something like that. That was what I was thinking he was saying about that. My other question was about the metaphor of the song. because this I thought was one of the really interesting, unusual parts of this chapter. How he begins by invoking song and then telling us what this freedom song is not. It's not this, it's not that. It is the blossoming of your daughter. It's not the fruit. It's a deep calling. And I think this suggests that song itself has this open-endedness, that something in music that can't be captured quite, the essence. Like you could try to describe a piece in song, but then you might not describe it, and it might go a different way entirely. So it's something that you can't pin down, but you can become aware of it in some other way, perhaps. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. So I will comment on the music part. I think this is just incredibly beautiful. He's saying, and your body is the harp of your soul, and it is yours to bring forth sweet music from it or confused sounds. So
yeah, I think, Shrikant, that has a flavor of anti-asceticism to it.
Yes, yes. I mean, I will put it in another way. It's basically integration between spirit and body. He's saying that your body is the harp of your soul. So the body is the instrument of your spirit. It's not two things. It is not this versus that. Like asceticism holds that by shunning the body, shunning things off the body, you will pursue the spirit. And he's saying no. He's saying the life and the living form, the form and the function are one thing. Form is simply expression of the function. You don't seek the function by saying no to forms. So your body is the harp of your soul, and it is yours to bring forth sweet music from it or confused sounds. So, I mean, it's just so much is captured here. So one is the matter of integration. Second is the matter integration between spirit and body, spirit and matter. Second is music. You know, music by its nature is integrative, and it is integrative in multiple dimensions. It is the core of the spirit that is being expressed in the notes, and the notes are consonant with the bodies. When you're singing, for example, singing is the best way of looking at it. It's like your entire body is involved in production of the sound. Your spirit is directing it. You are reacting emotionally to it, and you are conceptualizing as you go along as best, you know, in the context of all of it, without losing the integration. If you lose the integration, then it becomes confused sounds. So it is about integration. It's a very, very simple way of pointing to this multi-level integration. That is actually who we are. You know, that's our nature, and that's there in nature. It's like, it's not as if that the bees and the flowers see it as a problem to be solved, and, you know, that there is a conflict between them. No, this is all a part. And I think the music captures it beautifully. Thank you for pointing that out.
And Shrikant, what about the Seven Sisters, or anybody?
You know, tell me a little bit about the Seven Sisters. Who are the seven sisters? Go ahead.
You talking about astronomically?
No, I mean, where do you see, can you read the paragraph passage where it talks about?
Oh, yes, here it is. It's on page 80 in the middle or near the top. 7 are her sisters, and the least of them is more beautiful than pleasure. And above that, for they shall find pleasure, but not her alone. And have you not heard of the man who was digging in the earth for roots and found a treasure? So in seeking pleasures, we will find other things. We may find love, almost like in Plato's Symposium, we might say, where we might start by seeking out the pleasures of the body or the beauty of the body, but then that might lead us on to other things that we didn't anticipate initially and weren't looking.
Sorry, Mark, so when he says 7, what are the 7 things he's referring to?
I'm not sure. We could fill them out with our own imagination.
Oh, I don't want to do that because I want to make sure that his sound. So, okay. So I don't have much to say because I don't have the, don't have the context. I'm sure there is a context behind this. He's a very, erudite fellow, and he's pulling in something, but unfortunately I don't know what it is. So I cannot talk, in a way which makes sense to me. And I don't want to make up things myself, because then that would not be the right thing for, it may not be what he's thinking of. So, all right. So thank you, Mark. Great observation as always.
Just yes. I didn't do a whole bunch of research on it, but I saw some analysis of the prophet that alluded to the 7 sisters being the different each of the different chakras. So one of them is pleasure, but then there's all the other ones of the chakra.
Okay. Wonderful. I that would make sense. All right. Thank you. Let's continue with the next one. Who would like to read? Go ahead and type in R in the chat. If you have not read before, we'll give you priority over people who have read before. And if there aren't any volunteers, we will cycle through everybody who has read. So let's see here. So first chance is Yulia, followed by Maritza. Yulia, go ahead. Would you like to read?
Oh, all right, yes. And a poet said, "Speak to us of beauty." And he answered, "Where shall you seek beauty, and how shall you find her, unless she herself be your way and your guide? And how shall you speak of her, except she be the weaver of your speech? The aggrieved and the injured say, beauty is kind and gentle, like a young mother half shy of her own glory she walks among us. And the passionate say, nay, beauty is a thing of might and dread, like the tempest she shakes the earth beneath us and the sky above us. The tired and the weary say, beauty is of soft whisperings, she speaks in our spirit. Her voice yields to our silences like a faint light that quivers in the fear of the shadow. But the restless say, we have heard her shouting among the mountains, and with her cries came the sound of hoofs, and the beating of wings, and the roaring of lions. At night the watchmen of the city say, beauty shall rise with the dawn from the east. And at noontide the toilers and the wayfarers say, we have seen her leaning over the earth from the windows of the sunset. In winter, say the snowbound, she shall come with the spring leaping upon the hills. And in the summer heat the reapers say, we have seen her dancing with the autumn leaves, and we saw a drift of snow in her hair. All these things have you said of beauty. Yet in truth you spoke not of her, but of needs unsatisfied. And beauty is not a need, but an ecstasy. It is not a mouth thirsting, nor an empty hand stretched forth, but rather a heart inflamed and a soul enchanted. It is not the image you would see, nor the song you would hear, but rather an image you see though you close your eyes, and the song you hear though you shut your ears. It is not the sap within the furrowed bark, nor a wing attached to a claw, but rather a garden forever in bloom and a flock of angels forever in flight. People of Orphalese, beauty is life when life unveils her holy face. But you are life, and you are the veil. I'm sorry, but I actually have to leave early. Thank you so much. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you,
Good
Yulia.
night.
Thanks for coming. Bye. Maritza, you're next.
And the poet said, "Speak to us of beauty." And he answered, "Where shall you seek beauty, and how shall you find her, unless she herself be your way and your guide? And how shall you speak of her, except she be the weaver of your speech? The aggrieved and the injured say, beauty is kind and gentle, like a young mother half shy of her own glory, she walks among us. And the passionate say, nay, beauty is a thing of might and dread. Like the tempest, she shakes the earth beneath us and the sky above us. The tired and the weary say, beauty is of soft whisperings. She speaks in our spirit. Her voice yields to our silences like a faint light that quivers in fear of the shadow. But the restless say, we have heard her shouting among the mountains, and with her cries come the sound of hoofs and the beating of wings and the roaring of lions. At night, the watchmen of the city say, beauty shall rise with the dawn from the east. And at noontide, the toilers and the wayfarers say, we have seen her leaning over the earth from the windows of the sunset. In winter, say the snowbound, she shall come with the spring, leaping onto the hills. And in the summer heat, the reapers say, we have seen her dancing with the autumn leaves, and we saw a drift of snow in her hair. All these things have you said of beauty, yet in truth, you spoke not of her, but of needs unsatisfied. And beauty is not a need, but an ecstasy. It is not a mouth thirsting, nor an empty hand stretched forth, but rather a heart inflamed and a soul enchanted. It is not the image you would see, nor the song you would hear, but rather an image you see though you close your eyes, and a song you hear though you shut your ears. It is not the sap within the furrowed bark, nor a wing attached to a claw, but rather a garden forever in bloom, and a flock of angels forever in flight. People of Orphalese, beauty is life when life unveils her holy face. But you are life, and you are the veil.
Wow.
I think it
Oh,
continues on two more lines.
oh,
Go ahead.
oh no, I'm so sorry. Beauty is eternity, gazing at itself in a mirror. But you are eternity, and you are the mirror. I'm going to read that again. People of Orphalese, beauty is life when life unveils her holy face. But you are life, and you are the veil. Beauty is eternity, gazing at itself in a mirror, but you are eternity and you are the mirror.
Wow, this is amazing. So
Wow, right.
what I want to do is I want to read now just the beginning and the end, because the entire middle is what beauty is not. So let's just leave that out. Okay. And a poet said, "Speak to us of beauty." And he answered, "Where shall you seek beauty? And how shall you find her unless she herself be your way and your guide? And how shall you speak of her except she be the weaver of your speech?" The beauty is not a need, but an ecstasy. It is not a mouth thirsting, nor an empty hand stretched forth, but rather a heart enflamed and a soul enchanted. It is not the image you would see, nor the song you would hear, but rather an image you see though you close your eyes, and a song you hear though you shut your ears. It is not the sap within the furrowed bark, nor a wing attached to a claw, but rather a garden forever in bloom, and a flock of angels forever in flight. People of Orpheus, beauty is life when life unveils her holy face. And you are life, and you are the veil. Beauty is eternity gazing at itself in a mirror. But you are eternity, and you are the mirror. I want to connect this with what we studied about Owen Barfield and his conception of aesthetic experience. He said aesthetic experience is the same as you being conscious of something new in that very moment. It is the feeling, it is the felt transformation of consciousness. He calls it felt transformation of consciousness. Okay. So see how it is. It's saying that it's an ecstasy. It is not about outside things, about what you have seen or what you heard, but what echoes within your consciousness of it. It is not the image that you would see, not the song you would hear, but rather an image you see through, though you close your eyes, and a song you hear, though you shut your ears. Beauty is life when life unveils her holy face. It is your experience of life, but it is the unveiling. So it is your new consciousness of something fundamental about life that transforms you But you are the life and you are the whale. Life is always there, right? I mean, this is again coming back to contemplation and prayer. God is always there. Nature is always there. The mountains are there. The forest is there. You know, the seas are there. But you have closed your eyes to them. You're wearing veils. So beauty is that parting of veil, that rending of the curtain of the temple, where you see and you are with God or nature. That experience, that aesthetic experience, is the conscious experience. It is one and the same thing. That's what Owen Barfield talks about. Beauty is eternity gazing at itself in a mirror. So this is being with. This is being with. But you are eternity. And you are the mirror. So this is your consciousness and existence. It is about consciousness and existence. It is a relationship between consciousness and existence. It's that profound. It is a new consciousness of existence that transforms your consciousness. That is the aesthetic experience. That is beauty. And it is there all the time for you. But you are focused on your needs, and you see only the cessation of what you are, what is missing. You getting back what you're missing. You're seeking something specific and you get that and you're happy. That is the lower level. That is not beauty at the level that he's talking about. It's the same distinction he's making about the great pleasure and good pleasure and not good pleasure. It's the same distinction he's making. It's the same identical distinction between prayer and contemplation. This is not about asking. This is not the beauty of warmth when you're cold. That would be prayer. Contemplation is you being focused, you being one with the sea and the mountains and experiencing it as a part of you, causing a transformation in you. That is what he's talking about. And so that's what I would say. Now, I would love to hear what anybody else thought about this beautiful poem. Go ahead and type an exclamation mark or raise your hand in Zoom. Maritza, go ahead.
Just the beauty of this this poem chapter is just it's almost breathtaking in the beauty of the poem. I would also like to point out that there are very few of the chapters in his book, The Prophet, where he ends the poem chapter by saying people of Orphalese. I have found that the ones that are most profound, he's saying that, and I feel like it's his way of saying, sit up and listen a little bit more. This piece, listen a little harder. And so I'll point out to you that he did that for beauty, and he did that for pleasure. He may have also done it for prayer. So I just want to point that out. But to me, I love the piece you read it, but I'm going to read this little part again, because he says, it is not the image you would see, nor the song you would hear. The key word there being would. And he says, but rather an image you see, though you close your eyes, and a song you hear, though you shut your ears. And if that isn't the most poetic way of saying beauty's there, it's there. You affect it not in either direction. It is unaffected by your desire or willingness to see it or not to see it or hear it. It is there. It's still there. It was there before you noticed it. It shall be there should you stray from noticing it. And I think that that is just, it's so profound, because we, again, in our modernality, we sometimes treat a thing as though its beauty is transient. And perhaps it bears considering, if a thing is truly believed to have a transient beauty, perhaps we should question whether or not it's beauty at all. Because true beauty has not that quality. It will be there. It is the garden forever in bloom. And that's why one can walk through a forest in the height of summer and see the majesty of trees. And you can come back in the height of winter and see the majesty of trees. You may point out different aspects of the same tree, but it is no less majestic. Okay, maybe slight bias there, but to my thinking, it's, when I think of an everlasting beauty, I do tend to go towards nature and trees. But I think that it's there because even as it's dying, a tree has this beauty. Even if it's the stump now, there is this like awesomeness to it. Like, and I'm using the word awesome, like in awe type of idea. And I think that's the thing here is, beauty is life. When life unveils her holy face. And I think that is, I love what you said, Shrikant, in that, it's the felt transformation. And again, it's this idea of dig deeper. There is a surface level of pleasure that is easily visible. There is a surface level of prayer that is easily stepped into. There is a surface layer of beauty that is easily perceived. Gibran invites us all to look deeper. He invites us all to feel deeper. And I think it's a beautiful message. And I mean, and the words, the manner in which it's phrased is like, I don't know about the rest of you, but I feel like my innards are still tingling from having heard those words and seen those words. And it's, definitely this is art that one can feel.
Wonderful. Thank you. And that's exactly, that is beauty that you experience when you read this poem, because it is doing the same thing. It is, unveiling life to you in real time, and you are being transformed. Your consciousness is being transformed, that experience. Next up is going to be Mark. Mark.
Thank you. I feel so privileged in being able to even participate in this conversation. The conversation itself might be beautiful in some intrinsic way, with everyone sharing their ideas. So in that way, Gibran has created something that continues on and perpetuates and grows in some way. And I guess what really struck me about this chapter, I also thought it was sort of one of the most beautiful, maybe because of this series of images that he gives. I thought it was a chapter full of paradox, maybe much more than the others. It begins with paradox in the sense that, let's see, where is the beginning? Yeah, beauty, right. Where shall you seek beauty, and how shall you find her unless she herself be your way and your guide? This is a paradox that you can't find something, because if you don't know what it looks like, you would never be able to recognize it even if you found it. Something like Plato describes about virtue in the Meno. It's a little different. It's given a little bit of a different twist, because he's saying you're seeking something, but you don't even realize that only that which you thought you had not found could guide your way. In other words, you already have it. And the same thing with you speak, but it's really only beauty that is the weaver of our speech. So we can't speak of her per se. It is, and then, so in the middle, you have this paradox about, as Maritza had pointed out, as you drew our attention to, Maritza, that it's not in the song, or it's not in what we can see, but it's what we can see when we have our eyes closed, or the song we can hear when we're not listening, perhaps. And then it ends with the paradox of you are the life and you are the veil. So in a way, it's infused with paradox. And what really stood out to me beyond that was this sort of deep psychological insight, where he's talking about what other people say beauty is. And each one of them is something that that person is projecting their need and their desire, really. And that is how they are imagining beauty. So the night watchman, what do they want? They want to stop their job and go home. So beauty to them is the dawn. The toilers see beauty as someone leaning over, hunched over, working. And each one of these is a projection of the self. And but then, of course, we realize that it's none of those things. So that was what I wanted to share. I think you both already captured a lot about what beauty really is in this. I guess I was going to mention the connection to the Upanishads, where I think it's in the Kina Upanishad, we read about Brahman, which is this unnameable, perhaps essence of the universe, for lack of a better word. And we're told it can't be seen, but is that whereby the eye can see. It can't be heard, but it's that whereby the ear can hear. And it can't be spoken, but it is that whereby words are spoken. I think it's a similar image is going on here. And it's the power behind that makes reality possible.
Wonderful. Thank you. Great observations. I'm glad you made it to this session. This is great. You brought our attention to the first two lines, which I kind of ended up not looking at because I was so enthralled by the lines at the end. So let's look at the lines in the beginning and then also in the middle. Because if you look at the middle, right, all what he's saying beauty is not. All of those are temporal things. Those are conditions, current conditions of something missing that they are looking to fill in. And then that particular seeking, Panksepp in his work on neuroscience, it calls it the seeking circuit. So you're going like this and you suddenly realize that there is a need and it goes down. You're at a down stage. And then when you get whatever it is, you come back to the same state. You don't go above that. You just go back to the same state. And that's a perennial seeking, but that's just part of our, primate life. And that's what it is. And it is all temporal reactions to temporal things. What he's talking about of beauty, I think one point that Mark made, which was excellent, is that this book itself is an eternal source. We are reading this after, so many years, so many decades after he has written it, and it still has that freshness. It is still producing this felt transformation of consciousness in us as we read it and as we discuss it. And I think one of the great things which I love about this group is that people are openly sharing that experience with each other. And as a result, what we are getting from this work is actually so much more. As each of us are doing the same thing, they're capturing one little more aspect of beauty. And it is the infinite, it is the eternal, it's like nature. Okay, so you can read the beginning by substituting many words, Where shall you seek nature? And how shall you find nature? Unless she herself be your way and your guide, right? If you want to understand nature, you have to let nature guide you. You can't say that this is nature. I think this is nature. Make up something and try to do that. You will miss it completely, just like you will miss beauty completely. And how shall you speak of nature except the nature be the weaver of your speech? If your reality, you're letting reality shape your speech, you can do that. You can use the word thou. If you look at the entire Tao Te Ching, this is exactly about the same thing. Can you seek the Tao? The only way to seek the Tao, how shall you find the Tao? Unless Tao herself be your way. Way is the Tao Te Ching. Tao Te Ching. The is the way. So you flow like water, like the Tao. That is what the ideal of the sage is. It's the same principle here. And how shall you speak of the Tao except the Tao be the weaver of your speech? So you have to let nature guide you. The same thing is about beauty. It is kind of the eternal quality. Beauty is a little bit different because it has a conscious component to it. But consciousness, our consciousness and existence are both just are. And you kind of have to be open to that. And if only by being open to that, you will discover it. If you now look at what everybody else is doing, they are actually taking something like, oh, I need to go home now, or I'm cold now. And they're just calling beauty. And what happens as a result of it is that you have just used a veil. That's a complete veil, because that veil is going to stop you from actually seeing nature, seeing beauty. You're going to be focused only on the veil. So it is the eternal versus the temporal. And it is yours genuinely interfacing with that. So let's go to, go ahead, Mark, you had a comment, and then we'll go to Tanya.
Oh, I'll go after Tanya.
Sure.
Thanks.
Tanya, go ahead.
Yes, I was just very curious. Well, I did want to add one quick thing, but I'm also very curious as to whose idea was it to bring this subject, or like this person. I'm sorry, I don't know who this.
Owen Barfield.
Oh,
I just thought of it when I read it, so I brought it up.
Oh, that's so wonderful. I'm so happy. I just wanted to comment maybe before that eternity and it's this eternity is the one word that comes up when I think about this whole book. He's literally so metaphysical. He's just beyond any kind of explanation. Like if I were to pick two words, metaphysical and eternity. I mean, he's speaking about life. He's speaking about living this human experience, but aside from living this human experience, living beyond this experience, going into different realms, perhaps touching different metaphysical, esoteric things that maybe I don't know. Maybe during his time, they were probably dabbing into. Love the book. It's just filled with great illustrations, but the way that he's just so succinct with how he expresses himself and trying to come across in a very, I'm teaching you this is what you must know, as opposed to, question this, question that, maybe a little bit of that as well. But I mean, overall, really great read. I'm so happy I joined tonight. So thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. And absolutely, this is metaphysical. This is really, I mean, his base is religion of both Christianity and Sufi thought, which is really influenced very heavily by Indian thought as well. So, but the thing that is unique about him is that he internalizes it and expresses it in his own inimitable way, which is completely original. And that's what makes it beautiful, because he removes all the ritual aspects of things, of this religion, and just goes at the heart of it. And ultimately, it is also philosophy. Religion is simply a form of philosophy. And what it is focusing on are things like nature and consciousness, existence and consciousness. And what is the proper approach towards existence and consciousness and life and virtue? So that's what he does. So he's a philosopher. He's a poet. Poet is a very, historically is a very high compliment, because it's somebody who is a philosopher and who can express deep understanding of philosophy in a form which does this felt transformation of consciousness in people with very little text. So the way in which the Arabs describe him or describe good writing is that it is very, very hard to read or to write, and very, very easy to read. Okay, so that's the standard here. It's like you do all the work, he does all the work, and he just puts these words down, and you just read them and you get something. I mean, it's the most amazing things. And thank you, Tanya. Next up is Mark.
Thank you, Tanya, for that. Drawing our attention to eternity. I was going to mention that the idea of ecstasy, I guess I was thinking this, Shrikant, when you were saying how he has composed something that is continuing to generate something special, and we're all sharing it. We're all experiencing something like the ecstasy that he's describing, I think. I'm not 100% sure I know what he means by ecstasy, because it can mean different things, perhaps. And I think in the Greek context, because it's more or less a Greek word, it means literally standing outside of yourself. But within this context, I see it more as standing within yourself and without, maybe within and without at the same time. And maybe there's not really a good word for that other than ecstasy. So, and the other idea was that maybe you spoke about this in another meeting, the way in which the chapters begin. It's the poet asking about beauty. It's the hermit asking about pleasure. It's the priestess asking about prayer, which seems like he's trying to tell us something through those patterns. And I wonder what people thought that might be.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mark. Let's go to Maritza next. Maritza.
That might be a good question for our wrap-up session.
So we'll put that for the wrap-up session.
Yeah, I feel like that could be almost a
Yes,
good
and
chunk of the meeting itself.
We will actually list all of them, so that people can, instead of just doing one-off things of what they remember, we'll list all of them and then try to see a pattern in that. Excellent. Maritza.
Love it. So, listening to Mark speak, this section, it because there's so much in this poem, it brought to mind the fact that this is yet another section where he's saying beauty is not this, but in this section, he's saying it's not this, it is this. And, he's saying, it's not, you're not speaking of beauty, you're speaking of needs unsatisfied. And then, so what he tells us, beauty is an ecstasy. Beauty is a heart inflamed. Beauty is a soul enchanted. Beauty is an image you see even with your eyes closed. Beauty is a song you hear even with your ears closed. And just that imagery, it's so rich, and it's a heart inflamed, to me, is just the idea of a heart inflamed is almost like, if you were going to get physical about it, that's like a permanent thing, as opposed to having a dry mouth. Because, he says it's not a mouth thirsting or empty hand, so it's something bigger. It's like your heart literally being inflamed. And the imagery there it's interesting in that he writes in such a manner that the is louder. Like it's because not a mouth thirsting, not an empty hand stretched forth, not needs unsatisfied. Those are still very poetically beautiful statements, but they just can't compare, and they don't capture the mind or the heart, if we're looking at it metaphysically, as does an ecstasy, or a heart inflamed, a soul enchanted. Like those are so very striking. It's like what you're saying, Shrikant, those phrases reach out and kind of like stroke your insides. So it's that felt aspect of the felt transformation. Like you have no choice in reading this but to feel what it is he's saying. And from a poetic lens, it's so, it really is such an impressive work of art. It truly, truly is.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I think, this is the genius of Owen Barfield, of looking at, saying it's felt transformation of consciousness. Soul enchanted is exactly that. Heart enflamed is exactly that. This is ways of describing exactly that in their own way. All right. I do want to do the religion one because it connects with all the ones that we've been looking at. So let me go ahead and read that. We'll probably do just one reading, so we'll have time to discuss it. If you could share the screen. Okay. And an old priest said, "Speak to us of religion." And he said, "Have I spoken this day of anything at all yet else? Is not religion all deeds and all reflection? And that which is neither deed nor reflection, but a wonder and a surprise ever springing in the soul, even while the hands hew the stone and tend the loom? Who can separate his faith from his actions, or his belief from his occupations? Who can spread his hours before him, saying, this is for God and this is for myself, this is for my soul, and this other is for my body? All your hours are wings that beat through space from self to self. He who wears his morality, but as his best garment, were better naked. The wind and sun will tear no holes in his skin. And he who defines his conduct by ethics imprisons his songbird in a cage. Freest song comes not through bars and wires. And he to whom worshipping is a window to open but also to shut, has not yet visited the house of his soul, whose windows are from dawn to dawn. Your daily life is your temple and your religion. Whenever you enter into it, take with you your all. Take the plow and the forge and the mallet and the lute, the things you have fashioned in necessity or for delight. For in reverie, you cannot rise above your achievements, nor fall lower than your failures. And take with you all men, for in adoration, you cannot fly higher than their hopes, nor humble yourself lower than their despair. And if you would know God, be not, therefore, a solver of riddles. Rather, look about you, and you shall see him playing with your children. And look into space, and you shall see him walking in the cloud, outstretching his arms in the lightning and descending in rain. You shall see him smiling in flowers, and then rising and waving his hands in trees. If you'd like to comment, go ahead and type an exclamation mark. Or raise your hand in Zoom. The first thing I want to point out that he's saying, Have I spoken this day of anything at all else? That's all I've been talking about. And is not religion all deeds and all reflection? So there is this unity and integration of the deepest thoughts, your everyday actions, and the entire gamut of your emotions, all in one. And that is his entire approach throughout. But it's so.
That's what was so truly striking to me. And it was the line, who can separate his faith from his actions or his belief from his occupations? And, he's been saying that, this is the penultimate of the sections where he shares with us based on the people of Orphalese asking of him. And, he points out, justly so, this is what he's been saying. And I love the line that you pointed out. Shrikant, have I spoken this day of aught else? Basically, he's telling you, if we go and we look today, good and evil, prayer, pleasure, beauty, he's saying those are all religion. And I think that there's such power in thinking that. But, then it goes, that might be another great thing to maybe hone in on a little more when we're doing closing, is the idea of, everything, love, marriage, children, giving, eating, working. It's all religion. It's interesting and fascinating thought experiment. But going back to his thoughts on religion, I really find that it's, for me, the shocking pieces here were where he talks about the limitations. He says, he who defines his conduct by ethics imprisons his songbird in a cage. Obviously, here we're assuming that songbird in a cage is a bad thing, right? But he's talking about ethics. And why would I not wish to define my conduct by ethics? To me, that was really a fascinating thing to think about.
Can I give you a little bit of context on this?
Oh, yes.
So this comes directly out of the Old Testament and New Testament. So it is moving from laws to love, of moving from outside things. He's saying the cages are these saying, okay, thou shalt not do this, thou shalt not do this, thou shalt not do this. You have this, I think, 637 commands of saying of what you should not do. And you're kind of living as a songbird in those cages. Versus in the New Testament, you move the entire locus is moved inward, of saying your conscience directly relating to nature, you do what is right as best as you can. And even if you make a mistake, you just get up, face the music, take all the failures and start over again every moment. And that is a completely freeing sensation of saying, instead of obeying laws that we say are the laws, you're moving from that. So that is what he's referring to there.
So the fascinating thing is that I did not make that connection from Bible, but I that is the image he did ultimately paint for me. So I got the same aspect of that from his poem alone, because I didn't make the connection to Bible, that's so cool. And yet again, more evidence of the power of his phrasing, because that's exactly where I got from that he was saying it's the idea, and we have traversed this concept in so many different ways here together. Also what comes to mind for me, we've done some deep diving into different things stated by Jordan Peterson, and we've talked about this. Jordan Peterson has this deep concept that he spins out for us, talking about how you should learn and understand a rule before any thoughts or attempts at breaking it or ignoring it. Once you have understood the rule, you'll find you don't actually need it, but it's there as a guidepost should at some point you need a reference. And I'm hearing that here, like, because he uses the word defines, and defines can be a very rigid modifier type of thing. So, and that's what I also, at first when I read it, I was like, what does he have against ethics? And I realized the important word in that sentence was not ethics, it was defines.
No,
Ethics
that's
can,
beautiful. Can I add something? It's the question of form and function. Okay, it is form and function. What happens is that most people, so for example, even in New Testament, right? Jesus has said, I've not come to overturn the laws. I have come to actually fulfill the laws. But the way you fulfill the laws is to understand their spirit and make their spirit a part of you. And you live from the core of you according to that spirit. Then you are free. And you are following the law at the same time. You're obeying the law of nature, and thereby you're free. So you get both at once. Whereas his complaint is about the cages, because what happens is that these people who do that, they have converted the laws, which originally had a spirit, into forms or rituals. And they are considering that as a replacement from having spirit. They're actually wearing, he used the term wearing at that's when they're wearing their laws. This is like virtue signaling, okay, of saying, okay, look, I am wearing this cage, so I'm good, okay? But that's not what, ethics is about. That's not what goodness is about. That is not what truth is about. Wonderful. So do you mind if we go to Mark for a minute and come back to you? Okay, Mark, go ahead.
Just to build on what you were both saying, I understood it as in that sense of the overturning of the law, but also in the sense of calling it people's hypocrisy who wear their religion like a cloak, and a cloak is something that we change every day. So we might put on our religious cloak on a Friday or a Saturday or a Sunday and then take it off. And he's saying, no, this is a way of life. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Maritza, go on.
no, I just, there's, I find it interesting that he goes, like, explicitly also he speaks of God, which was a little surprising because in general he's been more, metaphysical after narrow. But again, it's that whole, but he's not really just talking about God, is he? He makes it bigger. I really like the idea, and this God that is described here by Gibran it's not my God, it's not Sri Kant's God, it's not Connie's God. It seems to be a God that we would all look at and say, yeah, that's my God. Like, even if you don't have, if your philosophy is not God per se, there is space here. And it's that transcendence that I find to be just so enlightening that he does. The idea of, you can see him smiling in flowers, rising and waving his hands in the trees, in the lightning, in the rain. So again, it's this idea that what he's saying to us, the true God, it's nature. So I think that that is so powerful. And it's done in such a way that there's no contradiction to one's belief if one does have a God to whom one so strongly holds. There's still no contradiction here. It can be anyone's God. And furthermore, everyone's God also includes a vision of nature. And that's what he's saying, which just, it's just so beautiful.
Maritza, that's just wonderful, because I think that's exactly what he's doing. And he's doing that again and again and again and again in so many different forms. It's quite stunning. Like, for example, you pointed out the cage and the songbird. You got the gist of what he was saying, that is gotten from this other source, but is being presented as in a human way, that any person can understand, of saying arbitrary rules and holding on to rules you don't understand, versus genuinely understanding things. But this point about God that you made right now is a profound one. There are very few thinkers who, there are a few thinkers. So if you want the nonfiction version of it, it is the best example of that is C.S. Lewis in his book Abolition of Man. Okay, where he calls this what people call nature as the Tao. Okay, and Tao actually captures it very well, because if you look at of all the great works that we have studied, Tao Te Ching, Bhagavad Gita, and the Bible, Tao is closest to the idea of nature that we have. Like almost everybody, Newton would agree with it, Einstein would agree with it, Jefferson would agree with it. It's simply saying that there are universal principles. The core idea there throughout is that there are universal principles in nature and in you, and acting in accordance with them makes life possible, because these are the universal principles, these are the eternal principles. So you can have a temporary fruit, but if you don't understand how things grow, those fruits are going to die. And you can pluck a fruit from something that is actually producing things, but then you're going to lose it. So if you are focused on 10,000 things instead of the Tao, you will lose both the Tao and the 10,000 things. And that's really what, this whole idea is. And so I definitely recommend Abolition of Man by C.S. Lewis as to kind of, is to give you, because what he does is that he does something very beautiful. He looks at the base of the concept of God as the universal principle that is underlying everything. And it runs through, he is talking about Christianity a little bit, but he's just focused on the base of it. And that's why he explicitly uses the word Tao. And that integrates completely with nature. There's really no difference. And but I'm just delighted that you could, that you see it here. And he exactly does that. I mean, and that's again a sign of a great poet. We saw it in people like Dante and people like that, or Goethe. It's like they can take these very complex principles and they can express it in their own way. They can use a metaphor and you can see it, like the songbird in the cage, and you get so much of theology just presented right there. Wonderful, thank you. All right, so Maritza, this has been some journey, and so firstly I just want to say I'm just so grateful to everybody, and being able to do this, because no matter how much you think about these works, talking like this is really the way of getting understanding the work. So now we're left with only 2 chapters, so we'll probably combine the 2 chapters and an overview in probably one one sitting at some point. And I think we are going to start off next Tuesday with Confucius, continuing of Confucius, but we'll finish this. Now, if anybody has any comments on the discussion today, you're welcome to make it. But let me just tell you some incredible things that are coming up. I can't believe them. So tomorrow it's going to be Phil, and he's going to be talking about a book called Mythologies, which builds up on all the linguistic work that he's been doing, including Owen Barfield. So don't miss that. That's going to be tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. On Thursdays, we're doing Stoic Thursdays. And then Evanique is doing a meetup on Friday on Mary and Divine Feminine. So that should be interesting. Then on Sunday, we've got two incredible meetups. I have this person who's been watching, I was not aware, but he's watched like 37 of our Louis Sullivan videos on architecture, and he's going to present on his favorite architect, whom Yasuhiko recommends very highly, and who's definitely has been on my list for some time. It's Christopher Alexander, and he's going to give an introduction to his thought. That's going to be at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. This gentleman, he's in UK, so that's the only time that works for him. And then at 8 p.m. we have Stefan Bao, and he's going to be talking about a model that Maritza brought to my notice. It's actually very similar to this Gibran idea, which is also very similar to the Bucky idea of saying that we are an integrated being, and we have to deal with us as an integrated being. Otherwise, we are lost, because you're unnecessarily creating conflicts within us and between us. And this integrated way of looking at life solves, not really solves, but it dissolves many problems. So it's going to be about that. And so hope you'll join us. And thank you very much. Marisa, do you have any final comments? Do you want to invite people to come back for the, I know that we're going to do wrap up. Do you have some thoughts about what we're going to do in wrap up?
The one thought is, I thought Mark's idea was a fantastic one of looking at the people who are asking about each chapter. And another one is the idea of the interwoven fabric of spirituality throughout this. It might be a really fascinating angle to discuss. But Shrikant, another is that we have throughout all of these various get-togethers, we brought in different thinkers, Owen Barfield, Louis Sullivan. It might be fun to kind of do something with interweaving those and how he's directly expressing some of their concepts.
Sure. What I would recommend is that for the wrap up, we should just do pure Gibran, and then
Okay.
one of our, taking 3 at a time, we will put Gibran in there.
Love it. Love that idea. That's amazing.
All right. Okay, folks. Thank you. Thank you for coming. And special thanks to Mark. Mark, you were amazing. Thank you so much. You added so much to the conversation. Mark, are you there?
Oh, thank you. It was really wonderful hearing everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye.